so riots broke out, and then eventually they brought in this guy that was in Raleigh, North Carolina, named Ben Chapes. And I think people know about Ben Chapes. And then, of course, this other group that they cornered, Women's 10 of Racial Unjust Rap, that was put on them, and they were honored from recently. But that happened when I was there. And in fact, we lived on the main street. When you come into the city off the bridge to come into Wilmington, we were on that main street. So that's where the tanks came in at. During the big riots were going on, these National Guard tanks were coming in. And I remember my mother, I was young, but she screamed, "Get down, get down, get down." You know, and of course I listened and I got down, and right at that moment I went down, this big tank of tear gas. I mean, this would have, if I hadn't gotten down, it would have hit me again. I don't know what would happen, I don't know what would be now. And and then all this shooting is going on. So I'm seeing this, and obviously he has to register what's happening. Of course, the racial picture comes with these kind of things. So I'm young, I'm seeing these things. So obviously, and then I'm going to listen to the ministers preach in the nation, and some of the things they're saying, obviously it begins to resonate with me that this stuff sounds right. I mean, these people must be, because this is the kind of thing that they're experiencing. Now, so I'm a part of, but I don't necessarily become what they call a junior militant person, because it's not a lot of young people in that town at that time. So I still go. But what happens, now I tell you, my uncle was in the military. He was in the Marine. Now in 1975, I don't really know how much he dies. He passes. And the son takes the leadership, Wallace takes the leadership. Now, you got to look at Islam in 1975. I want you all to think, as we talk about Islam in America, I want everybody to think about what Islam looks like in America now, but what it looked like back then, to get an understanding about how Islam is transitioning and transforming and progressing in America. Now, so in 1975, Imam, again, I told you the kind of things he talks about, human life, and etc. It's coming from the Quran. Imam W.D. Muhammad. What he's teaching us as time goes on. So he comes into the leadership and does exactly what his father expects him to do. It was always said that he was going to be the one that teaches them the Quran, bring them into the universal picture of Islam. There was no mystery about that. He was teaching that while he was a minister in the Nation of Islam. In fact, there's a very popular recording. In 1959, Malcolm X introduces him to speak, and it's on the line. It's online. You can go online and Google it and you can find this. And listen to his talk. And Imam Muhammad in 1959. Now he's not even a leader now, but just to give you an idea of what he was teaching then. He comes up and he begins to recite in perfect classical Quranic text the first chapter of the Quran, perfect, and he says it in the language. And after he says it in the language, then he begins to explain each verse with clarity and beauty of the Quran. What he said back then is, you can say it today, and it'll help to change some people. But that's what he was teaching. He was teaching that. He didn't just start teaching that when he took over the leadership in 1975. So obviously now he was the leader, so he had the whole community. So by 1975, the Nation of Islam, they were not joining the military. We all know Muhammad Ali's story, because really they were against taking life. They didn't carry firearms, and they were against killing. They really were. Muhammad Ali wasn't just saying that to get out and going into the army. That really was the teachings. And again, eventually, the Supreme Court eventually upheld that, and he was able to get back in the ring and not have to go to jail, etc. So, but in 75, shortly after that, now this is what inspired me. Shortly after that, Imam Muhammad, he picks up the American flag. This was never done before. And of course, we know what Muhammad Ali was saying at that time, before that, and others were saying about America, patriotism, the flag, and everything else. He picks it up, and he said, if you all won't pick it up, I will. And this is, that gives about, 10, 15,000 people there. One of the biggest gatherings. He picks up the flag, it's on the flagpole, and he holds it on the flagpole. And it's a picture that's in existence right now with that very moment where he is carrying the flag, and you can see the flag waving, because they'll tell you he was moving with it. It wasn't just, he's moving and he's showing them, he's waving the American flag. And then he stops and lets the flag rest on. And then other words comes out like, we have an obligation to support, defend, and protect our society. Now, where was he coming from? He was coming from what the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, also said. No matter where you are, if you're a Muslim and you're a minority in a state or a land that's not not majority Muslim, you have an obligation. If you say you're a citizen, you have an obligation to do just what he said.